Well, good afternoon, everybody in the Grace Church family. It's Saturday afternoon, trying to put together quickly a few thoughts ahead of our Simple Church meetings tomorrow. We'll be meeting in four groups at 10 o'clock and for Zoom at noon at 12 o'clock noon as usual. So look forward to being together, seeing everybody in those groups and greet everybody in the parking lot coming in, going out. It's just continuing to take care in the current environment with cleanliness and social distancing and all of those things. Um, there's even word out there that with the new strain that double masking may be necessary. Um, we'll leave that up to you. We're not going to mandate that right now. That's a matter of personal preference. But there is word out there that that may be helpful. Disposable mask underneath your cloth one, and did that today in the large setting of the funeral, and was comfortable and seemed to work and feel a little better when you're around a large group of people. But we'll let you make those decisions. But we're keeping things clean and ventilated as usual as well. So continuing to pray. I'll share a screen with you, and we'll get quickly into the lesson here so this doesn't drag on too much. I am going to kind of eliminate my screen here so that you can just focus on the screen ahead. I've changed this statement a little bit, and I'm working on it. So wanted to just highlight that for you before. I've always wanted the statement to be something that it just has everything about who we are and what we're based on here as a church family. So our core values are stated here, and it's all in one paragraph. And my hope is always that this will be something that you also could use to talk about who we are as a church and what we do. And so um, in our upcoming annual meeting, I'll be unfolding that, unpacking that a little bit, some of the nuancing that I've done here. But basically says this: because of the grand story of the Bible and God's invitation to us to make it our story as well, that sets the stage. We are a family of families who worship and follow Jesus as Lord by learning to think and live wisely together by His Spirit so that we can seek the welfare of our city and world in the way of Christ and His apostle. So we'll unpack that a little bit more in our annual meeting, which is going to be together with our all together meeting on February the 14th. So that's coming up on Valentine's Day. We've decided it best just to do that all in one morning. There's not a lot of time required. We will get a budget to you here in probably draft even early this week, if not tomorrow. We're working on that. Well, I'm sorry. No, it'll be next Sunday. I'm thinking ahead of Sunday. I was thinking we were already into February. A week from tomorrow, you'll have a copy of the draft budget that we've worked on based on your faith promise pledges. And please get those pledges in if you haven't done that. Get them to Scott, scan it, email it to him, take a photo of it, text it to him, drop it in the mail slot in the church office, whatever you need to do. But that helps us make a really well-founded understanding what our potential income is for the year. And from that, then we determine where every one of those dollars goes monthly and yearly by virtue of what you've pledged to us and what we think reasonable expenses in those are based on what they've been in current years. So it's a process we've been pretty good about over the last couple of years, and we have really positive things to say about what last year's budget showed us as well. So just keep those things in mind. Again, we will meet tomorrow in Simple Churches at 10 a.m. So look forward to seeing you there. Hope you're continuing in your Bible reading. I am working on, can't promise anything soon, but I've got a template developed where we'll get one of my mass emails out that is a Grace Church version with clickable links in the email that you'd be able to follow through the week. So it'll take you to the verses there in YouVersion or Bible.com, it would take you to the videos in YouTube and developing those templates, because I know many of you want to be on track, but you don't have an automatic way of doing that. And we got a template developing that. So maybe sometime soon, I've got, we'll see if we can get that going out to you regularly, like other emails. Continue to check email. Email tends to be the base method of communication, and then reminders can go out, small things in things like Facebook Messenger or whatever. If any of you are WhatsApp users, we may want to also develop some WhatsApp groups around our simple churches. So um, give me some feedback if WhatsApp is also something that you regularly use. Those of you who are savvy with that, I know it's very helpful if you have contacts overseas. A lot of the world uses WhatsApp as well. Please continue to pray for the Basuri family. We did have a very emotional, but a very moving and touching remembrance of his life this morning. Um, really just grieving alongside the family and the Spanish church right now, as they lost their pastor very, very quickly. And but the church seems to be pulling together. The family is just going to have to get through this, and we're here for them. I've invited them to join up with us until they are able to get things going and the family doesn't have the pressure of trying to do something on Sunday. So we may see them joining us. Comfort them if you see them joining in any of our simple churches, or they're online to those who are bilingual and are able to meet with us. So pray for them. It was a great tribute. We will be praying together on the night of Wednesday the 3rd at 7. So that's our usual community time. Share those prayer requests in the Facebook messenger groups through, with the simple churches, get those through Grace Church Prayer and Praise. So anything that's updated from Sunday's Grace Notes to Wednesday, if you want to update prayer or praise, answer new requests, you can still get those in the pipeline so we can all be praying about them and update them for Wednesdays. So it's a great habit we're developing. It's wonderful to see all you there, and we're able to break even into smaller groups and pray more specifically for one another. So I encourage all of you to join in that time. It's a great time together. We are actually moving, and this is our last Sunday praying for the Albania work and the team there. We were able to really, I think, successfully put together our 4 recruiting videos for Life to the Nth. After a couple of weeks of really going back and forth, it was amazing with the distance and everything. The guys it just really gelled together. And so on Thursday, we were able to produce 4 videos in an hour and a half. Little 5-minute videos. It'll be YouTube videos that begin to introduce Life to the Nth in Albanian, just as if someone was kind of watching us on a Zoom meeting with that. So pray that those tools will continue. We've got a pattern going. We're going to continue to produce that work and hopefully lay down some foundations for people to really get to know Life to the Nth and get a group of leaders started doing that. My hope is sometime here in the spring, we'd have a large group of guys in the Albanian speaking world, pastors and teachers and leaders who would learn how to use Life to the Nth as a tool, and also help us progress our work forward in building that network. So thanks for your prayers for that. That's a positive thing happened this week. We are in, I guess now week 4 of our Luke Acts study. So Tuesday email will go out. We'll be studying Luke chapter 19 through 23. So you can read all that and then watch the accompanying video in the book series by the Bible Project, Luke Acts. So we're making progress. That's really, really been a great time of introducing us to the sweeping story. Luke Acts is a very, very important part of the New Testament, and we're developing a great tool that I hope will help us all really to think about this well as be able to introduce others to the plan of Christ, because it's the whole thing is right there encapsulated in Luke and Acts, and that's why we're working on that and developing that as part of our life and ministry development track for classes and teaching. I've titled this message today, the series of thoughts to you, Knowing the Future Now and Living and in parentheses, or dying for it. 1 Peter 4, 1-6. We're continuing on in this series, and I'll walk through these slides, but you have all of those in the slide set and you can read through them. Don't need to repeat them as well. You know by now where we are in the literary design and intention, Peter, that's described in the Bible Project poster here. So I hope you refer to this often and just think about where we are in the big picture things. Go back and follow the sequence of ideas here. See if you could even talk your husband or wife through it. Have your kids explain to you what's going on in this. Might be a good way to really, really develop a good understanding of the first letter of Peter. Up until where we are today. It's kind of a walk through the book of Peter. We've done the walk through the Bible things before, so um, maybe that's a one way of using this as a tool in your family or throughout the week. We're looking at these hinge passages. We're coming up on another one that's going to lead us into the last section there on suffering and future hope. So look for those markers. I highlight this just to be familiar with a literary marker that shows that the author's changing his emphasis or changing his focus on things. And we as readers need to learn to take note of those things. That's where we can see this pattern of letters emerging. I've talked with you about the hinge passage. This is what Peter is unfolding right now in the section that we're in. What does this look like specifically? What is the implications of these verses? This is kind of how Peter's intro to the section that we're in now. So you can see how this is a hinge passage, and we're looking in more detail to that, and we have been over the past few weeks. So we're here in this section right now, 3:8 to 4:11. We've talked about the fact that we find ourselves often in circumstances that reflect Jesus's persecution and suffering. We talked last week about baptism and those strange ideas, how baptism connected with Moses, or connected with Noah, I'm sorry, and some of the strange events of Genesis 6, as well as a reference to that book of Enoch, First Enoch, that Peter refers to almost exclusively, a little bit in Jude with that too, but mainly Peter. So drawing on some of that, the expectations that were created with that, but that now have become reality and actually clearly spelled out with Jesus and his death, burial, resurrection, and coming again. And then that's what we'll look at next week, in the idea of being vindicated and exalted. And there's hints of that as we get into the passage today, the vindication that's going to come for those who are followers of Christ now and have responded to his good news. So we're looking at this passage in this section breaks down into 5 big chunks, and we've been looking at it in this way. So we're looking this week at 4:1-6. And again, remember what the New Testament is a story, and it's drawing us into that story. And that's important with today's message because it really is, again, Peter is just constantly drawing his readers and the people that he was writing to that time. Don't forget the big picture. Don't forget the big story. You can't say that enough when the realities and the grind of day-to-day life seem to be just working in ways you never expected or counter to what you hoped. Peter says, keep the big picture in mind, and don't let it. Don't let that picture, don't let that story get changed in your head. Follow the narrative, follow the story that God has set up and what's going on. So here was my summary from last week, that when followers of Jesus find themselves in the place of their Lord, facing difficulty and hostility to the surrounding world, it is paramount to keep the big picture in mind. A picture with Christ as its central feature and actor. The cosmic significance of what he has accomplished gives full confidence and hope to his people that they too are on the right side of history. God's story, which is set above and challenges all other spiritual and man-made versions of so-called history. In other words, God's story is the one that's real, and by which all other stories are going to be measured and challenged or proven to be false. And that carries into the things that we look at today, which is sort of a really builds on this idea. Nothing new here, so hopefully not too much to go into detail on this, but with the passage we have today, the challenge up front in chapter 4:1-6 is, how would you summarize that passage in your own words? What does it mean? Sit down with your Bible, read through those passages, think through it in light of the larger picture that you had back there with the Bible Project poster on First Peter and say, okay, what does Peter mean to say here? How is this? What is this contributing to the larger whole? That's what you want to do. That's a skill every one of you needs to develop, because you're all readers, you're all thinkers. You're able to try to process that, and that's a very important part of learning. You won't forget it once you do it. It's kind of like riding a bike. You never forget. It just sticks in your mind. Let me read through the passages quickly before we unpack them a little bit. So then, since Christ suffered physical pain, you must arm yourselves with the same attitude he had and be ready to suffer too. For if you have suffered physically for Christ, you have finished with sin. Interesting. You won't spend the rest of your lives chasing your own desires, but you will be anxious to do the will of God. You have had enough in the past of the evil things that godless people enjoy, their immorality and lust, their feasting and drunkenness and wild parties, and their terrible worship of idols. Of course, your former friends are surprised when you no longer plunge into the flood of wild and destructive things they do, so they slander you. But remember that they will have to face God, who stands ready to judge everyone, both the living and the dead. That is why the good news was preached to those who are now dead. So although they were destined to die like all people, they now live forever with God in the Spirit. So there's a passage, Peter 4, 1 Peter 4, 1-6. Why is the close association with Christ and his suffering made in our lives? Why does Peter keep harping on that? Why? What's going on here? What, you know, yeah, we know that, but it's sort of omnipresent. It's always there, and in Peter's thinking, well, of course, it was a reality of the church at that time. That's one thing, and you wonder why. Well, I started following Jesus, the answer to everything, and the Savior of the world, but things aren't going the way that I thought they would be or hoped that it would be. Or maybe you knew that, maybe you understood that, but it just wears on you, and you just you just wonder, well, okay, why didn't it just all end with Christ? And why does this continue on? Why is it coming to me? Why in this way? And it's very, very different for different people, different times in history, different cultures. Certainly not the same for us as it would be for people perhaps in the Arab world, or parts of the world where Christianity is very much the minority tradition, if not non-existent for most parts, which it has been many times in history and will continue to be. So as we look at this first set of verses here, 1-3, and I won't read it again, you can read it there and you've read it through, but think it through in light of this question. And again, I'm drawing from N.T. Wright's popular commentary here on the early Christian letters that hopefully just stir up your thinking here. It's kind of functioning like the consult the scholars section that we use in First Principles. But he adds this to our understanding. Here, suffering is given yet another meaning. Suffering, it seems, brings about a particular transformation of character. It makes you reevaluate your whole life. Sometimes it happens when someone who's had a potentially fatal stroke or heart attack makes a remarkable recovery. In such cases, people often say that they have rethought their whole lives and now realize much more clearly what matters and what doesn't. In the same way, someone who has suffered for the gospel may attain a new kind of clarity. They see more sharply the kind of world that sin produces, and they know that they are done with it. And they see far more gloriously that God's will is the only thing worth following. So it's kind of one of those moments where there's no going back, where you realize, hey, there's a new reality here. I can't I can't live as I did, pretending I don't know this or I not realize this. And suffering may be one of those things. As you think through it and you work through it, it may be the thing that deepens and strengthens our character, the kind of fruit of the Spirit that we talk about in Galatians 5, 20-22. Or the thing that just makes you say, you know what, it's now time. I'm a follower of Jesus, and I'm not going to play games anymore. I'm not going to try to ride the fence. I'm on this side of things, and I'm staying here because look what it's already cost me, and I've come through it. And if it costs me more, I already know what that's going to look like. It's for a good cause. So it can have that effect of kind of creating a milestone in our life, or a milestone in the life of a church, as well. So, I think about the Spanish church right now. They'll never forget this transition of the founding pastor having now passed in this COVID season, and now a new era has begun for them. And obviously that's been because of the brokenness and the sin of the world. That wouldn't have, who knew this would happen a year ago, but yet here we are. And it's going to test and strengthen their character and their commitment to one another. And these events can do that. The pre 9/11 world, the post 9/11 world, the the things that happen in your families, the pre-cancer days and the post-cancer days, or the loss of someone else. Even more so though when that happens in light of actual suffering because of Jesus, when it's very, very clear. So um, see how that talks about this. But again, what the strange idea, the good news being preached to the dead, all about. We saw stuff like this last week, and you wonder once again, okay, what's Peter up to here? Well, this one's a little more straightforward, and this is not talking about what we were talking about last week, where Jesus going and preaching to these strange spiritual beings. This is talking about people who or have received the gospel. The gospel, the good news of Jesus, has been proclaimed to them while they were alive, and now they have died. But that's not the end of the story. There's something else going on here, and Peter puts it in light. And again, the vindication idea starts to come to bear here, and we'll cap that off next week. But let's look at the quote on this here, longer one. We see when he here, verse 6, I'm talking about the writer, Peter, says that the gospel was preached even to the dead. Are these the spirits in prison of 319? The best answer is no, they're not. Here as there, the overall context is the vital thing. Peter, as ever, is encouraging those who have to face downright hostility because of their following of the Messiah, and because they refuse to go along with the wild and dehumanizing behavior of those around, verses 3-4. But this will all be sorted out at the judgment. When that time comes, the wicked will have to give an account of themselves. The pagan world can look on when a Christian dies and say, there you are. That's now what's happened to your splendid hope, quote unquote. It may even look to the pagan as though the Christians have lost the struggle. And it's often that way in the world today, I would add. But these Christians, now dead, had already received the powerful word of the gospel, which was preached to them during their lifetime. They'd heard the news about Jesus and they believed it down deep in their bones and their soul, and had embraced it as their story and their life as well. Thus, even though bodily death has come to them as a form of judgment, that's why death has come into the world, because of our corruptibility as human beings, and our mortality is a result of sin. But it doesn't have the last word. Their believing in the gospel during their lifetime means that now, by God's Spirit, they are alive in God's presence, awaiting the resurrection which is yet to come. It was my word to the family today and to the church today, as well as others who reminded them of this, that this is not the last time. They're not saying a farewell to Wilson that doesn't have a future. This is a sleeping. This is a time of rest. Wilson's spirit resting in Jesus's presence, and waiting for the day when he will be vindicated by virtue of his body being raised to new life, to have a glorious body that, like Jesus's resurrected body. Philippians 3 talks about that, the end of chapter 3, and reunited with that spirit to live forever in new heaven and new earth. So, that's the ultimate future. And so when a person believes the gospel, that future becomes active and becomes real. That is their future. And so even though they're still alive, that future is real. The God's pronouncement, the hope and the surety of their resurrection has moved into the present, and it now changes the way they live. And even if they die, it still doesn't change that future, because that future is not about the life that we live now. It's about Jesus and his overall plan. And that's what the gospel has brought us open eyes about, and have brought us new perspective on. And that's what the world is going to be held account for not embracing that and not coming into it, and trying to seek its own way, or denying it altogether, or ignoring it. So it's at the same time our hope. It's at the same time our mission too, in light of the world around us. So I wanted to summarize this passage this way: the suffering and pain that is a present reality in the world as it is highlighted is is the very reason for Jesus' suffering, compassion, and faithfully rescuing all who will believe and loyally follow. That's why Jesus came in the first place. So uh, the fact that suffering continues is points us back to the fact that this is why Jesus came, and until he finishes his work, it will remain. But he has won the victory over it, as we saw in weeks past. The disciple of Jesus holds this as a deep understanding. It's how we see everything and understand it. And it's a commitment we hold deeply as well to assist him in that mission. Uh, all this is because the future judgment of God that awaits all has already been made clear in the good news they have heard and wisely responded to. You know, on that day, because of your faith in Jesus, the proclamation, the reality of your resurrection, and the proclamation that you are my part of my family, you are my child, you are one of mine, and I will not hold you accountable personally for the things that you've said, done, thought during your life here on earth. That's been dealt with by Jesus, and that's been removed from you. The non-believer, the one who doesn't embrace this, will be held to account for those things and will pay with it with their future existence in eternity, away from God, and a terrible, terrible diminishment of their humanity, and a denial of that humanity. God's offered us the ability to be truly human in the gospel, and to deny that is to turn away from our own humanity and to become, a shadowy reflection of what God has designed us to be. And imagine for that, we just get smaller and smaller and smaller across eternity. Uh, Whatever that judgment is going to look like, it's going to be more awful than anything the medieval images of hell could hold for us. It's far, far worse than that kind of a thing. It's conscious. We know it. We made a choice for it. The believer of Jesus has not, and it forms a watershed where we had life on one side and life on the other side, and we now live and understand not only for ourselves and others in a different way. So, what changes our thinking? In our thinking and actions as individuals or community need to be renewed. What do we need to be renewed in our minds? So, renew your mind. Be transformed by the renewing of your mind. What needs to be renewed in our minds, if anything? Or just basic reinforcement of things that we already know. Talk about that when you get together. I've also got a few questions at the end that could serve as discussion questions as well. But final quote here, summary. Peter is treading a fine line. He's not glorifying suffering for its own sake. He's not saying you should go looking for it. But just as the crucifixion of the Messiah was at the same time the most wicked things humans ever did and the most powerfully loving thing God ever did, interesting way of thinking about it, so the wickedness of those who persecute God's people forms the strange frame within which the power of God's transforming love can shine through all the more strongly. It's not just judgment; it's opportunity to demonstrate God's love and grace at the same time. So what happened on the cross? We're cross-shaped people. We live cross-shaped lives because at the same time, injustice was done on the cross, but justice, because of God's love and compassion for us, was done at the same time too. And we reflect that. And living in that conflict, living in that tension, is naturally going to cause pain and suffering in a variety of degrees. As you think through issues together, what are some of the ways we experience pain and suffering because of our love of Jesus today? How can we go about building the bigger picture that puts this suffering in perspective? Do you have this bigger picture? If not, how are you going to get it? What do you need to do? Can you envision how you might think and feel if you were one of the early followers that Peter is writing to? Put yourself in their shoes and think about it there, and then fast forward into our day. What are the keys here that motivate us to live as we should as followers today? Let's talk about that as well. So that is the thoughts for today. I'll get this off to you and post it on YouTube so that you guys can begin to interact with this, and look forward to our time tomorrow as we gather together in our simple churches and at Zoom at noon tomorrow as well. God bless you all. Have a great evening, and